Welcome to the Poetry Show with the Podcast Poets. We aim to bring poems and poetic discussion to people who love poetry, to those of you who just aren't all that sure, and to poetry novices. Maybe we can inspire you to try a poem for yourself. I need to warn you that we just might use a couple of edgy words, PG-13 if you will, but I can assure you we will touch on an edgy idea or two. In each show we focus on a theme and hear how 4 very different poets have approached that idea in their poems. Hopefully something for everyone. So gathered here with me, Alan, to consider inspiration is
Rose,
Becca,
and Kit.
Welcome, Kit. Inspiration is divine. It is something that a god does to you. It is the act of breathing life into one, giving one an idea of new perception. Inspiring is also the act of breathing in, as expiring is breathing out. We typically today use inhale or exhale. Insofar as we use expire as the God-given end of life, our last breath out, our true inspiration as a baby when we make that first breath is inspiration. The word comes to us from Latin via French and Middle English. The Middle English enspire was purely divine. As an aside, the en prefix lives on in words like enliven and enrage, to put life or rage into someone. The word has been somewhat debased and is certainly overused, especially by creatives, who forget to be creative in their seminal or germinal moments. Today we're discussing the animus that changed something in our lives, gestated a poem, or better yet, changed someone else, hopefully for the better. Sadly, much of my work is inspired by the evil in others, but I live in hope that I will inspire goodness to others and change the world just that little bit before I expire.
Good one. I saw where you were going with that.
Well, it makes...
Yes, that's all right. So,
inspiration. It is a funny word, isn't it? Because
well, the problem is we as poets, we are inspired to write something. We're walking along, we're driving along, we're sitting somewhere, we're like, you idiot, or God, that was cute. And so we're inspired. So in a way, inspiration could just be what it is that makes you pick up a pen and scribble things down. But I have run with the topic properly, so I feel quite ready for the show. So you've got the topic, Mr.
Yes,
Man. You have to do a poem now.
Oh no, I have to do a poem now.
Yes.
You know, that's such so unfair.
The clue is in the title.
Well, this poem I picked up here is called Empty Walls. The empty walls bereft, swept clean by Etty's controversial scenes, a stark expanse of unrelenting terracotta, inexorably swept away by waves of chocolate applied by long-handled rollers, breaking across a tide of colour, wavelets glistening still in the radiant yellow light of now irrelevant illumination. Overall crabs scurry about the woodblock floor. They display the hues of past settings, badges of age and proficiency, though perhaps not that of the prowess so freely expressed by preening artists, whose plumage bristles and shimmers, a flaunting down of apparent conquest, to dazzle passers-by and ensnare their continued adoration. Okay,
so you saw something and that inspired you to write that poem. Is that from South Beach?
No, that's Etty. Etty, that's a York guy.
Well, yes.
Yes.
But I mean, I was thinking about the art center that we saw in Miami Beach that had fish and crabs and everything set in tile that would scurry and waves would go up the walls. And I just used to stand there and go, I love this place. But, you know, I had to leave it. All right, so Etty, explain to me Etty.
William Etty, a York artist who got into trouble for painting an awful lot of nude women.
Oh.
Yeah, but he was actually an extraordinarily good artist. He just happened to paint a lot of naked women.
Well.
But in this particular case, the art gallery was changing the displays. And basically they take everything down, repaint the whole thing over and start again. So it's a sort of complete revamp every time an exhibition changes.
Not a lot of art galleries do that, surely. They wouldn't have the time, would they? But that's kind of neat. They would just go in and decide they want all of this different and just change the color on the walls.
So what was it about the stripping down and sort of clearing away that inspired you?
just the fact that all of a sudden everything had gone.
Ah,
They were repainting, and then we got the paint on the overalls, which was itself plumage, and then the artists themselves, particularly 17th, 18th century artists who were themselves painting plumage into their paintings. So so that was the connection.
Had you gone to the art gallery one day, then gone back another and found it all changed?
No, I've got no idea.
Oh, see.
No, it just it
So
just
you
came
can
to
be
me out of nowhere.
inspired. Yes.
It came out of nowhere. It was God given.
Yes.
I will confess that was not the poem I was expecting to read, but I couldn't find it. So.
Well, I was in Oslo recently.
It was one I collected for
I was in
purpose.
Oslo recently, and I put this little blurb up on Facebook about sitting in Oslo Cathedral and admiring the fact that it's small because it's as big as they could build it when they were pioneers, but it's big as their hopes. And so Alan goes, "So you went into Oslo Cathedral?" I went, No, I was just passing on the tram. So you make stuff up. It's entirely okay to make stuff up. That's the whole point. All right, so I'm going to leap in here, I think, actually. And when we discussed inspiration, I thought I would do something that people call an occasion poem. When you write a poem to celebrate someone's birthday or their wedding, and so you're inspired by this act. And so it's a dreadful poem. But it's okay. And it's about a very nice guy, very smart man, and it was his birthday. And also, he is the professor who introduced me to archaeology, which is kind of what I've done.
So an inspiration for yourself. Exactly.
This is why I did it. When Emily and I went to Skara Brae in Orkney recently, I said, Em, you have to see this. And she goes, why? We're standing there, it's freezing. And I said, this. I read you that book on Skara Brae when you were 4 or 5, and it led to everything. She goes, the last 20 years of my life is because of that book. I went, yes, Skara Brae has blighted your entire life. She went, wow, actually, that's kind of cool. So sometimes things inspire. So I'd read this book and I thought about it, but then I had this class with Ernie. It was his birthday, and this is a horrible poem, but it's okay because the man is nice. And it's all, as we've been discussing, tell, not show. A gift of history. With a twinkled eye and a dirt-stained quartz flake, he has captured you. You are hooked. Worse yet, if you bring a lifelong love of rocks with you, years of peering into holes now, that's all you want. With a hearty laugh and a wicked quip, he enlightens. Learning never feels like work. Information so plain you can't help but understand. Manner so plain you can ask if you don't. Stratigraphic years now. That's all you want to do, to dig back through years and piece it together. With a collection of knowledge, he teaches you, patiently, earnestly, until the past spreads before you within reach, clearer than you could have dreamed. And his name is Ernest, so he's Ernie.
Very appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. But yes, and that's when I realized I was hooked, because I was a rock hound as a girl, and I just loved them. And so I got there and went, and you need geology for this too? Oh, no. And so that's my inspiration, because he inspired me. And also it was a thing that we were inspired to do because of, it was his birthday. And I think it probably was a big one, which is why we were giving him poems and such like, or something. He was probably turning 50, and being dragged into that decade going, no, anything but that. And so I think that's why I did that one.
Yeah, inspiration is an odd thing, because we walk around and we see these strange things.
Well, yeah.
I mean, as poets, we sit there and we write this poem in our heads, and then the bus comes and we forget it completely.
Yes,
it's very irritating, because then you have to try and reconstruct it and just don't always manage. How about you, Kit? Do you struggle with this?
I think my best poems have all happened when I'm not entirely sure where they've come from. Certainly some of the more recent poems, just kind of, there's a coalescing of a feeling. And then as I write, it comes out more and more, and I kind of pin down what I'm trying to say and what has inspired me the more I write about it. So often a poem takes 4 or 5 drafts before I realise what I want it to be about.
Oh, that's neat.
And what that feeling is that I'm trying to capture. But I think it's good to bring one that's actually about a teacher, because when we talk about inspiration in a poetry show, the instinct is to immediately go for what inspires poetry, when actually what inspires us as people can have nothing to do with that.
Yeah, actually. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's why, if you like, that original definition as it's a God-given thing, it's not not just what the banal thing that made you write the poem, but the actual inspiration that made you become a poet. I think that's a much more important form and meaning of the word than the use that we've devalued it to as a sort of, this was the trigger for this particular poem.
And I think, appropriate enough, we never really forget the people who have inspired us. Certainly, yes. I can still remember the first time I tried reading poetry out loud and got a good response wasn't in an open mic or a poetry slam. It was at college when I was having kind of after-school session with some of the other English literature hopefuls for university, and we were reading Keats, and it was suggested to us, does somebody want to try reading it? It was Ode to a Nightingale. And I memorised the first stanza, went back the next week, and I read it very slowly, and the teacher said, why don't you try and read it as if every line is a new thought that's occurred to you? And I went through it, and you get in the mood, and you kind of forget where you are and just do the poem. And after I stopped, the two other guys in the class started clapping. And it was in that moment I thought, oh, heck, I might be good at this.
Yes, actually. Yeah.
What about you, Becca?
On the topic of sort of people that inspired us to become poets, I have a poem that I wrote when Leonard Cohen died, and Leonard Cohen was a massive inspiration for me because it was my first it was the first encounter I had with the kind of poetry that can kind of wash over you, and you can just let it wash over you and pick out new sort of fervent images every time. And it made me want. I really want to be one day as good a writer as that. I don't know if I ever will be, but I'm trying. And this is one that I wrote, an attempt in kind of his style, kind of. On the precipice of my 14th year, amid the wreckage of my little temple, a gentle silver shaman sung to me from just the other side of intimacy. Back then it was a revelation that anyone could walk so long along this smoky road and still be beautiful. I could have been in Suma, kneeling at the lyrist's feet, Udrea, Udsurea, in those days, those distant days. I discover it again each time I scatter, that duende with his shadowed summons, come back to me, dance along the pilgrim paths to help rebuild this diasporic heart.
Yeah.
Like, that one still isn't done, because I still, the ending still isn't what I want it to be. But like, I remember sort of listening to Cohen songs and hearing all this imagery that I knew must mean something, and I didn't know what it meant yet. But it was enough that I knew it meant something. Does that make sense?
No,
and having sort of like kind of delved into kind of sort of some kind of Jewish symbolism, kind of, you know, symbolism around kind of Babylon and stuff like that. It's kind of it's the kind of stuff that unfolds over time.
No, I like that. Sometimes you don't have to know necessarily what it means, and sometimes I've said that to students who are starting out. Just keep plunging ahead. Go for the words you know, and the rest of them will come into place.
And I think that's something we haven't touched on yet, is the idea of being an inspiration yourself. And I'm sure you, Rose, as a teacher, maybe there are students that you can think of who you like to think have been inspired by you.
Yes, actually. There was one, and we were in a little tiny village, and she was 15, and she had come along because they had disturbed a lot of skeletons, and she said, "Can I help?" I said, "Absolutely," and she and her friend helped. Her friend was the vicar's daughter, and she's looking at a skull, and I just thought to myself, man, those ear holes are huge. You know, I was just thinking about the EAM, the external auditory, and she went, "Rose, is this normal? These ear holes look really big," and I went, she has it. She has the gift. She has the sight to look at a bone. And she was 15 and really hadn't seen many, many skeletons, you know? And I just thought, you're good at this. And so, yeah, no, that is that light bulb moment. And I think that's why some people teach, because it becomes addictive. You want to see people go, ah. And it's just like the teacher's high. You know, they talk about runner's high, but forget it. It's the teacher's high. That's it. The light bulb. That was great. I loved it.
Yeah, so I think I've come at it from that angle as opposed to everyone else's poems in the idea, because certainly when I write, it's with the idea people are going to see something in my writing that they haven't seen in writing before. Certainly
Yes.
it motivates me to include diversity and things that aren't normally represented in media.
Yes.
So the poem that I've brought today is called Sticks and Stones. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can make me feel like I have been captured and sealed in ink, like the author has somehow built my body into their pages. The shock of recognizing myself on a sheet is the reason I keep coming back. Back, more, say it again. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can splint me from a tree trunk, wrap me in a cast of bark and sink my roots into the earth to say this is my place. And now, solid, growing ever upwards, I can gut myself, cut slices of my flesh and crush myself down into pages of my own. And I hope they whisper to you, welcome home.
Oh, yes.
Ooh,
Yes, exactly. Well, we'll all leave
the
now.
shock of seeing myself on the page. I love that.
Yeah, actually.
I have a particular poem that was written in what must have been a moment of inspiration and also self-recognition, and every time I reread it I get to a point, and it's just this couple of lines. It's a very, very personal poem that I would never read to an audience, and I read it and then I get to these two lines and it says, and in my head I am reading this as though I am performing it, as though I never will. And every time I read that poem I do the exact same thing. I come to those exact same lines and go, damn, I know myself.
Yeah. No, I that is good. No,
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there is that
Actually.
moment reading when you can see the audience, you can see them go, that sort of in-breath that they've caught something, they've got something, you've spoken to them.
Yes.
That is, well, if you think about it, that's the inspiration. They took a breath because of something that you said or did. Or
That's
performed.
fantastic.
yes,
And
exactly.
That's that's the magic moment for I think for a poet in performance, when you see the audience getting it.
But it's almost that group therapy moment too, when you walk into a room full of people who are suffering from you. That's when I'm teaching. We get back to the
That's your
class.
Freudian moment,
That's
dear.
exactly. No, I like that. People are Jesus. I got a case of rose, man. I just can't shake it off. When you walk into a room full of people who have the same situation that they're dealing with. And that's when you realize I'm not alone. So that's kind of neat that you've noticed that on the page, kid. So that's kind of good. That is good. That is. I know what you mean. Actually, like it ain't just me, because someone actually wrote this down. So there has to be at least one other person. Yes.
I kind of feel like sometimes when someone else inspires you, it can be like maybe it's because I read a lot of fantasy, but I sort of it sort of feels like those kind of urban fantasy things where someone who knows about the magic opens a door and invites you to come in.
Yes.
And you become aware of an extra dimension to reality, you know? I don't know if I'm being too figurative here, but you know what I mean? It feels like someone opening a door saying, this world exists, only the world is made up of like symbols and words.
Yes.
So we've come back to how inspiration can help you find yourself, which I think is interesting, because we talk about inspiration helping you make something, whereas actually sometimes it can be more about who we are and recognizing ourselves.
I think it's a two-pronged thing. I mean, on the one side, when you do something as a consequence of inspiration, you develop yourself because you're pushing yourself to research something or whatever is needed to complete that thing that you've been inspired to do. But if you've done it right, that same moment of inspiration then moves on to inspire somebody else to actually pass that, if you like, pass the conch along to someone else to pick that up and do something themselves that is
So we hope.
related.
Well, Ernie
So we
Wiegand was a big deal because at the archaeology thing, not to go into too much detail, but a close relative had died. And this college was right near the cemetery. And it was the first time I would just go somewhere and be close to the cemetery and not think of it at all. And when I would take his tests, I was only putting the words down on a bit of paper, and it was important to me to get like a really good grade and to learn. And I was still walking with 2 canes in those days because I hadn't had a spinal fusion yet. So it was literally Christina's world. Sometimes I'm crawling along the floor and I'd struggle up and walk on 2 sticks. And I didn't feel as if that left me out of archaeology either. So he was just like, no, there's room for all. But no one will hire you. But I digress. but archaeology for all stops at the classroom, she says. But I was inspired to go to school. I was inspired to go forward. I was inspired to learn, and I was inspired to do the very best I could on a test too. And I used to get the extra points, so I'd get like scores of 105, and this is like, because I'm competitive even with myself, and so that was fun. So he was all around inspiring. It led me to do other things, and when I found that I liked bones. He was like, yeah, well then look at those, because you can look at them in a lab and people will bring you things to look at, or, so that was also good too. He was all around inspiring. I think, I hope he's still teaching out there somewhere, because he was that's about 20 years ago though. Yeah, sure he is. Yes. He must be.
It is. I mean, it is a strange thing. I mean, occasionally I've had people who've asked me about, they sort of kind of want to write, but they haven't quite got it in their system that they actually have to sit down and write stuff.
Yeah,
and they said, I want to be a writer. I said, well, do nothing, because when you want to be a writer, you will write. End of story. It's not I want to be a writer, therefore I will write. It is, I better start writing now. I've got this stuff has to come out. This stuff has to go down. That's a writer.
Oh, yes.
Not the, that person made a lot of money writing. Let's go and write a book to do that.
Oh, you can tell that though. I
think Anthony Burgess did that. I've got not quite sure, but he sort of basically retired and started writing his grand opus, and I think that was just a sort of conscious decision. I'm going to write now.
Maybe.
So.
I mean, every now and again, you'll encounter a writer, like a prose or a poetry writer, who says, like, don't wait for inspiration, just write, and it'll happen.
Yeah.
But like, I encounter fewer of them than people who say the urge has to come first. Sometimes you have to like encourage yourself to be open to that urge, but the urge has to be there.
That's true.
Yes,
I think yes.
But the urge is there, though.
Yeah.
At the back of it all, the urge is there. Something says, "I am a writer," and off you go. You may have to force yourself to do it. I mean, many writers have to force themselves to sit down and write their 1,000 words a day or whatever. But it is.
I think it's a habit. It's a good habit. If you can get into the habit of just writing. I mean, that's what I had to do when I was writing the thesis.
Not to go on a tangent about prose, but that's what I'm trying to do right now.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's a good way.
You can get to a point where you inspire yourself with your own prose, and then you reread, the last paragraph of what you read, and you're back into it. And I think that's the best position to be in, where you can cycle it.
Yes,
and
I've done that.
Yourself.
I think also carving out a certain time of day. I mean, I used to sit there at the desk in the King's Manor when I was first doing a PhD a long time ago, and I just stayed till the end of time. And someone I said, "Rose, go home, man," and it was a very good thing, because when I got in, that was working time, and when I got home at 6 p.m., that was legal, authorized, sanctioned playtime. I could watch a TV show, I could watch a movie, I could go out to a film, and I couldn't feel guilty, because when you never really have an end point, you're just like, I could be doing that now. I should probably be doing that now. And you never do anything. You're never not doing anything. But having a time that starts and then a time that stops means you focus. So I really liked that. That was really good. You going to do another poem, Mr. Allen?
Yeah, I think that it'd be good to think about that it's not just writers who get inspired. And this is what is called of composition.
Oh, right, yes.
Picture the artist painting a picture, collecting colour from ordered chaos into chaotic order of composition. Conceive the writer creating a concept, collecting ideas from illogical order into ordered logic of composition. Note the composer recording tones, collecting sound from disordered logic into ordered dissonance of composition. Imagine the poet crafting an image, collecting rhythm from conceptual dissonance into pictorial phones of composition.
Sometimes I wish I could draw. because I see some things that I wish I could just sketch out. And I can't, because if you walk around with the camera going clickety clickety, well, I think these days they would take it off you because I think you're you're trying to, yeah. But yeah, actually,
yeah. Sometimes you can find yourself inspired to do something that actually you can't do, and I find that's one of the most frustrating feelings in the world, especially as a writer who wants to improve. You have an idea, and there have been times where I've gone, I'm not going to do that yet. I don't feel ready to do that justice yet, and I'm going to put that by. And then one day I'll find this notebook again and come back to it, and I'll be good enough to do that idea justice.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Well,
I like
actually,
that.
I found that once or twice as we've been doing these podcasts. We've sort of had a topic and the need to write a poem, and I've got 2 or 3 abandoned attempts to produce poems poems to order, if you like. I mean, I can do it reasonably well, but there's that moment where you say, actually, this has got to be a bit more than just a fluff piece, and they're now sitting waiting for me to complete them properly.
I will interject a thought here on that. Open mics. People will say, I haven't written anything new, so I don't go to the open mic. And I always say, you go anyway. Because if you're in a room full of 15, 20, or 30 people reading something out, you will be inspired.
Yes.
And that is actually really key. That actually is super key. What I would do, I went through a patch of about 2 years, I wasn't writing anything poetic. I would bring in things like Billy Collins and read his work out, or read someone else's work out. I'd read out someone else's poems who weren't mine, but that made me. It's like we did an episode ages ago called Other People's Poems. We brought in poetry that we liked, because that reflects us in some way. We like something that we find admirable, or that touches us, or is we find ourselves on the page. And so yeah, if you feel as if you're not writing and you want to, then go listen to it a lot. Listen to us a lot. But also go to the open mics and bring someone else's work and just read it. Yeah.
Although that can be frustrating. I say, oh, that was a good idea. That's a good idea. But I can't use it because someone else has done it.
No,
I know you say that.
There's only 7 stories in the world, right?
Yes, but it's the images, not the stories.
I suppose if you pay conscious homage to something, or if you try and use someone's thing consciously as a jumping off point to actually create, I suppose there's a thin line between that and just being kind of a hack.
Well, you can also quote them and just say,
as a harsh word.
I'm inspired by so and so, and then the 2 lines of the poem that really resonated with you, and then you go on and do your own thing.
I often write down, certainly at open mics, if there's a particular phrase or image that I really like, I write it down. Sometimes my best images have come from mishearing other people's imagery.
Oh yeah, actually, I've taken to doing that at the end of the open mic. If there's been a really good line or 2, I've been putting that up on Facebook. I've said, can I, yeah, and I'll just quote the one line that I just go, oh, I can't, yes.
Creative telephone, if you like.
Yeah,
yes.
well, in a way.
That makes me think of Catcher in the Rye, because in Catcher in the Rye, the reason why it's called Catcher in the Rye is because Holden Caulfield mishears a line in a poem to see a body, catch a body coming through the rye, and he creates this whole fantasy image of being the catcher in the rye who's there to protect the innocence of children, and it's all because he misheard.
Yeah.
And I love it when things go wrong in an interesting way.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and I think has anybody else got something particularly that they've brought along to add to this?
Well, we are inspired by just the act of everything. So basically, this packet that has 200 or 300. Well, okay, I've exaggerated.
Yes.
A few poems in it. All are inspired by a thing, but I think we should go on maybe and see what else inspires us next week. Maybe.
I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah.
So, thank you for listening to our rumblings on inspiration. You have been listening to The Poetry Show with me, Alan Gillott, with
Rose Drew,
Becca Miles,
and Kit Marshall.
You too can get involved. Send us some ideas for themes or topics you'd like to hear us discuss,
please,
or to take issue with things we have said. Come back next time when we might be discussing immigration, or thunderstorms, or gardening, or fire.
Ooh.
How do people write a poem from their ideas? And of course, if you have questions, we might even have an episode of questions and answers that you've come and passed through to us. We have been The Poetry Show, and we're the Podcast Poets. Tweet to us on Twitter at @podcastpoets, email us at podcast@podpoets.com, and find us on iTunes and give us reviews and ratings. This has been The Poetry Show, produced and edited by Adam Taglietti as a production of Eden Agency.